I enjoy watch people teach them how they did something and then seeing light bulbs go off. That's something that when you're building a community, like that's what you're trying to do.
Talk to your users, right? If you want to build a community of your users, you better understand who they are, what they care about, what they think about. And in the same way that you need to develop the product for them, you need to develop the community for them.
Never productize your community. However, I do agree with what you just said.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is an educational episode.
Hi, I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
Hi, I'm Ashley Smith.
Now, here's the founder experience in 2025. One investor says you have to be PLG or your product will never scale. Another says founder-led growth is the only way until Series B. A third says if you're not community-led, you're irrelevant. And on and on. If you take this advice, you can go absolutely crazy. The worst thing is, it tends not to work. When you're going from 0 to 1, you've got to hustle, you've got to put different things together. And so instead of listening to all of these investors, listen to an investor who has really been through it all. This is the recipe, this is the juggle you need to do to get from 0 to 1. Can't wait to get into it with our special guest right after the break. Today's episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by .tech domains. One thing about starting your startup that should be easy but isn't is naming it. Why is it so hard? Because all the good .com domain names are taken. So you end up doing something silly like misspelling it or adding random prefixes or suffixes. No more. Your domain shows your focus and intent, so you should make it sharp, clean, and unmistakably tech with a .tech domain. Head to get.tech/TSP or a registrar like GoDaddy to grab your .tech domain today. That's www.get.tech/TSP for the Startup Podcast. Ashley Smith is, in my opinion, far and away the world's best marketing thinker when it comes to developer tools. Her CV is insane. She was at Twilio in its early days and helped turn it into the first great API company of the cloud age, then led marketing at Parse through to its acquisition by Facebook. Ashley was CMO at GitLab and saw it to IPO, then Global VP of Marketing prior to its acquisition by Microsoft. After this perfect record of building the world's leading dev tooling brands, Ashley started investing and sharing her knowledge with the many startups in the space. Today, she is founder and general partner at Vermilion Cliffs, an early-stage fund backing the world's best developer-led companies. All of which, of course, makes her the perfect person to talk about what it takes to get from 0 to 1 and really grow your startup. Ashley, welcome to the Startup Podcast.
Hey, Yaniv, thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you. And yeah, Ashley and I, we actually go back a long way. There's one part of her CV that doesn't get mentioned a lot. So she actually spent some time at Google and we had a lot of fun working together. So just to start with, Ashley, of course, the whole point of doing a startup is to grow it. And founders come in and they want to grow it. But what do they tend to get wrong about growth?
I think when you're a founder at the earliest stage, you're hearing feedback from everyone for different reasons. And all feedback is like not the same. And I think you have to always know that feedback usually comes with some sort of price or something attached to it. I think at the earliest stages, spend more time talking to potential customers or like what you think is the ideal customer and maybe less time talking to investors. That's actually what I think helps you build a better company and build like a better proof of concept.
Yeah, spend more time talking to customers is a really great bit of advice. And yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that this sort of advice normally comes with some sort of price or vested interest attached. And, you know, from the intro, which I shamelessly ripped off from an article that you wrote, you talk about all different investors kind of pushing the barrow on different types of growth. And it's not just investors, right? It's also a lot of, you know, LinkedIn thought influencers and advisors and consultants and people like that who are like, yes, you know, I'm the PLG person or I'm the sales-led growth person or the community person. And I think you're suggesting perhaps ignoring most of that and talking to customers. Is it as simple as that?
It can be as simple as that. I think the answer is everything and also it's as simple as that. So all of the acronyms like PLG, which is product-led growth, sales-led growth, founder-led sales, all of them. You're doing all of it, but spend more time with customers. And I post on LinkedIn, spend less time on LinkedIn. So I think that's really the key. Talk to customers who could actually be using your product, prove it's actually something people want to use or care about, and just ask the question, will you pay for this? And if so, how much? And if people say, I would love to pay you for this, and here's how much I'm willing to pay, you're on to something. And that's at the very earliest stages. I think that what people get wrong is they get handed a playbook or they read a book or they, are told by someone, You should be doing PLG from day zero. And like day zero, there is no product to lead the growth. Like you can't build a virality coefficient, thing into your product if you don't have any users or you don't have product market fit. And so I think that people just kind of get ahead of themselves and try to throw a handbook or a playbook into their strategy when really it's like talking to customers, understanding product market fit and building a product that people actually love to use. And there's like that moment of delay.
I think that's fascinating. And one of the things that strikes me as I listen to you is that very much sounds like the advice I would expect to get when I was talking to an expert on product. I was like, how do you build a product? How do you find product market fit? And here we're talking about growth and, in a sense, marketing. And we did have actually quite early on this podcast a few years ago, we had Casey Winters on, and he's sort of a specialist in growth and sort of using, not product-led growth, but kind of baking product and growth into a single cohesive unit. And it sounds like that's what you're advocating, right? And so I guess an interesting question for me, and this is especially, we're talking at the earlier stages, does it even make sense to think of product and the distribution or the marketing of that product as separate things, or are they really one and the same thing?
It's all the same thing. That's something that I think that gets lost in all the acronyms is at the earliest stages, your product is your marketing strategy. Your product should be the core thing you're focusing on, because no matter how good your marketer is or your salesperson is, you could hire like the best in the world. If you don't have product market fit, it's not working, it doesn't matter. We can't really sell vaporware to developers. It just doesn't work in this market. And so I think in your earliest days, your strongest marketing strategy is leading with product. And I think all the way through to later stages, for me, later stages is like Series B. So like not, IPO.
Not Series K? What? Who just raised a Series K? I was like, what the hell? I
Yeah,
can't count that high.
We're going to start doing like double Zs. Yeah, I think that people begin to think about product and marketing and sales and engineering as these like very separate things. And the moment that starts to happen is when you start to see companies stop shipping or start like listening to customer feedback, which are the things that kind of kill companies at the Series B stage. I think from the earliest days, everything should start in with your product. And no matter how many acronyms you like try to layer on top of that as your strategy, if your product's not great, it's not going to ever sell.
So what does that look like in practice? I'd love to go back to your CV there, right? Like you did this at GitLab or GitHub or Twilio. So you were on the marketing or the growth side of those businesses, but you're saying product and marketing are one and the same thing. And obviously whatever you did there, along with the rest of the team, was immensely successful in all those cases. So I don't know if you have stories or principles you can distill from those experiences that illustrate what you're talking about.
Totally. I think they're all different. But they all started with really, really incredible founders. So Jeff Lawson at Twilio, one of the best founders you'll ever have the pleasure of working with, very strong product vision, cared deeply about customers and cared deeply about the brand and design. And so I think that because he was so passionate about those areas, you see it throughout, even like in the later stages of the company, you see it throughout. Being super important. So in that case, I was a junior marketer doing all sorts of jobs. For me, I think the most impactful thing that we were doing was a lot of DevRel. So like community events, like Twilio 15 years ago was like the queen of community events. And what's lovely about this current era is events are back and everyone's like excited to go to AI events in San Francisco and New York again. And it feels very reminiscent of 2010. So for me, that's been a lot of fun. Parse, same, excellent founders, scrappy team. We just grew like crazy. And the key to that one was content. So content for us, because it was the beginning of mobile, and we just like latched on to mobile being like the thing everyone was trying to read about, and partnerships. So we had all these great partnerships. And so like if we're going to attach an acronym to that, it's like the community-led growth piece is more what I would say to those first two. GitLab, same thing, incredible founder, right? Sid is one of the like most strong-willed founders I have ever met in my entire career. But we were an open source project, with a company layered on top. And we built everything in the open and we did tons of events, tons of content, but we launched product like crazy people. There was so much product coming out of GitLab for a while, in a moment that GitHub kind of created a pocket because they weren't shipping as much at that moment, that we were able to just win customers and users and grow the community through just constant product shipping and taking feedback from the community and customers.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes, Ashley, of founders listening to this. We've talked before about if you build it, they will come. That doesn't work. That's the field of dreams archetype, right? We're like, oh, all I care about is a great product and talking to users and, my awesomeness will be discovered. And that's not what you're saying, right? When we're saying that product and growth or product and marketing are one and the same things, we're talking about it being a cohesive unit. But dispelling that, so, you've talked about what approaches worked and, how it was different at different companies that you helped to succeed. But I guess that practical question is, so how do you know? How do you know that the right thing to do is events? Or how do you know that the right thing to do is content? Or rather, how do you get to the point of knowing?
What I've always said, and the metrics for me were always, how do I get us to 100 signups a day? That's different for every company. The numbers are different now, but we want to get to 100 signups a day. That's in the very earliest stages, right? So we're talking about currently a seed stage company. If we can get it to 100 signups a day, in a developer space, that's, I think, quite good. And so you start doing a little bit of everything. It's like experimentation. You do a little bit of content, you see what sticks. Right now, content's working really well, but it has to be technical content coming from the founder or the engineering team. That is always going to do better than anything a non-developer puts out. So you try a little bit of content. Let's say you do 10 articles. One thing's going to take off. Great. Figure out what that is. Is it a tutorial? Is it a workshop? What is it? Is it just a product overview or a demo? Do more of that. And you do that with every single tactic that you're being told you should do. So that's content. You should be doing developer events. You should be doing technical partnerships with companies that you want to be, attracting their audience. We actually just had within the fund portfolio, 2 companies do a partnership together, and getting to see those audiences overlap and get excited about using or having access to the other person's product. It unlocks thousands of users, right? So you just have to think about, if you're going after 100 users a day, right? And you get maybe 10 a day from content, 20 a day from content. Or you can go to this conference like RSA, the security conference, if you're a security company, and you're going to get 1,000 contacts there. You just really start from a purely numerical standpoint, looking at what your goals are, walking backwards and doing a bunch of experiments until you get to that number.
Right. So yeah, you're talking about experimentation. You're talking about trying things. One of the things that we often say on this podcast is that a startup at the early stage, especially, it's a learning machine, right? What you're actually building, what you're optimizing for is acquiring that knowledge efficiently. And so what you're saying is, yes, when it comes to growth, don't assume that you're going to be a PLG or partnership or community. Try different things. And then when you find something that works, double down on it.
Beyond double down. Yeah. The minute you find, and you can feel it, it would be the equivalent of you or I, we started recording a podcast about dogs, right? And the first 12 about dogs, no one's watching. Nothing's happening. But the 13th one, for some reason, it got 20,000 views and blew up everywhere. Go work backwards.
Everyone wants to know about Alaskan dog breeds.
Everyone loves Alaskan dog breeds. And so the reason, some influencer reshared it, right? And there's so many technical influencers right now. I went to a tech event 2 weeks ago, and one of the founders, who was lovely, was 4 big influencers are here. And I was like, what? Should I be nervous? Who are they? So I think that it's so interesting to watch the overlap of marketing and tech marketing at the same time, because previously we had a different version of that. But yeah, you just figure out what the inflection point is, and it feels different. You'll be going from we're getting no clicks a day on this piece of content to we just got 1,000. We're doing something right. Do more of that. And so your feelers are constantly up, trying to figure out what might be working and then go do more. That doesn't mean stop doing the other stuff. Just go do more of the thing that is working.
That makes perfect sense to me. Now, I'll ask a question from a somewhat selfish point of view, because I'm raising a pre-seed round at the moment. And, you're an investor. And one of the things that happens when you put together a pitch deck, when you talk to investors, I say, what's your go-to-market? How can you convince me that you've got a sustainable way of growing this thing? And what you're saying is the right answer is, we're not sure yet, but we will keep experimenting until we figure it out. And I don't know, maybe it's just the investors that I'm speaking to, but that doesn't seem to land that well, if that's the approach you take to kind of talking about, how it is that you're actually going to grow this thing.
Yeah.
So As an early stage investor, when founders come to you and when they pitch to you, what do you expect from them in terms of understanding the levers that they have to pull in order to grow their thing?
I'm in an interesting market where the people that are pitching me are also selling to the audience that is themselves, right? I'm
Yeah.
only backing
Yeah.
technical founders that are building technical product. And so they know how they like to be marketed to, and they've seen what's worked. And so I think that sort of sets my segment a bit aside. Like it's a little different than other people's. I think because I understand the nuances of go to market at the earliest stages when you're marketing to developers. If they come to me with a perfect plan that's like, here's what we're doing over the next 12 months. This is it. I know that they're just doing it because some investor told them to. I
Yeah.
prefer when someone says like, we think content's going to work. We think events are going to work. We think this podcast strategy is going to work. We're going to try it. We're not sure, but here's what we think is correct. I prefer that because it's in my market. That's the truth. The other big thing I look for is someone that can talk to customers. Go to market in the earliest, first year or two is just a founder talking to customers in my segment. And so it's really interesting to see how they interact with their potential users. That's almost as important as what they tell me they're going to do in their like marketing playbook.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, the way they get those first 5 or 10 customers is probably them at an event sharing knowledge with someone and being like, oh, we should try out each other's product or whatever. Or they're getting an intro from an investor, or they work with someone that's at some other company. And so really like in the very earliest days, those first 5 to 10 users, pilot users, you're
Mm.
not getting it from a go-to-market strategy playbook. It's coming kind of, can this person go and talk to people about what they're building and get that person excited about what they're building in a way that they actually try it out?
And you could call that, just to put an acronym on it, is sometimes seems to be called founder-led growth, right? Which is the idea of, the whole point of founder-led growth is you don't really know what you're doing. So you as a founder is going to go out there and just figure it out and put yourself out there. You're not going to hide behind a playbook
Yeah.
or a particular approach. You're going to put yourself out there. And so I think, although it's an acronym, it's actually an acronym that says, I don't know, it's the let's try it and see.
It's also getting called founder-led sales. Like, I think it's just
Yeah.
called building a business. I think we
Yeah.
just like tagging acronyms to everything because then we can build a brand around it and then we can like get some clicks in our own content. I'm saying that like I do the same thing. So I'm not
Yeah.
as said without judgment. But yeah, like it's what we've been told is founder-led sales or founder-led marketing, founder-led growth. It's just 3 people building a business in the early days, right? Or however many
Yeah.
people. So it's got to be driven by those people.
Just figuring it out and doing that efficiently, having the right people with the right user empathy, and then moving at the right pace is really, really the key to it.
Something that just came to mind is like the question I get a lot is who should we be hiring in the earliest days? And I think that people tend to overcorrect and hire like someone super, super experienced in one thing when you should be hiring more generalists. And I'm saying that across like different types of sales, marketing, product engineering. Like generalists really will get you a long ways in the early days. They may not be who wants to work for you at year 3, but in the first, 6 months to 2 years, I would say focus on generalists that understand that you have to blend all the acronyms together to actually get something that creates revenue.
Right. And when you say a generalist, you mean somebody who doesn't say I'm a PLG person or I'm a performance marketer, but rather like I'm
Totally.
here to figure out how to help this thing grow.
I'm here to solve problems. I'm going to do experiments, and I'm going to get us from 0 signups a day to 100 signups a day. We're going to work together to do that. It's not just one person. That's, the kind of profile you're looking for. And that's not always the person who comes with, 5 years of experience doing one particular thing. It might be that person. They've been trying to grow out of that one small role they've been doing, and they like show a ton of experimentation in that current role. But it's something I've seen over and over again. People hire specialists when they should be hiring generalists in the early days.
And if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, as they say.
Yeah.
But in a sense, I'm not trying to play word games here, but in a sense, you are hiring a specialist. You're hiring a specialist in experimentation, right? And I think that's sort of the point, right?
You can put that in the job description. Yeah, just put that like we're hiring a specialist, but only in experimentation. Like it,
Right.
It's just not someone who's had the like traditional titles and is like stuck to that title forever. But I think that I don't know about later stage, but in earlier stage, I'm even seeing the titles in the roles in sales, marketing, and product. They're all shifting around right now. And it's not the
Yeah.
traditional like product marketer or like demand gen or whatever they were 10 years ago. I'm seeing a lot of changes there, and I'm curious that continues.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. When I think about putting together a job description at an early stage, I always think about like, what's the shape of the hole in the company that we're hiring for?
Yeah.
The job description is someone who can fill that hole. It's like, we need you to come in and figure this thing out. And like, I can't tell you what to do. That's what what I'm hiring you to do. But you make an interesting point about job titles, and I think it kind of goes in cycles, doesn't it? So it used to be that, there are lots of very specialized job titles. And then, when in the era when I was at Google, maybe 15 years ago, and, you were sort of starting out at Twilio and places like that, it had collapsed a lot, right? You basically had a product manager and a product marketer and engineers. And then it kind of went all funny again, where you had like, in engineering, let's say you've got front end devs and back end devs and platform and like DevOps and blah, blah, blah. And
Hmm.
similar in marketing. And as you say, it feels like maybe it's converging again a little bit. I wonder how much AI is sort of pushing it in that direction. To me, it's a positive, right? Because you have fewer silos.
I think it decreases silos. I think we're going to see a lot of the titles continue. I keep seeing, instead of calling it, for a while we were like full stack engineer, front end, whatever they
Yeah.
are. I'm just seeing it being called AI engineer now. And then you can read into the job description and learn more, different than the researchers. So like I'm saying, just like the engineering team, they're like, we want engineers that have AI experience. And so yeah, it's the same thing's happening across marketing. So for marketing, I'm just seeing like
It's
not
how it
even
should be.
marketing, it's like GTM. It's like go to market. In my mind, go to market can mean everything from engineering to sales. Like everything is go to market in a company, right?
Yeah.
And so, but in this world, go to market is kind of taking the place of what used to be like product marketing, demand gen, brand marketing, like all of those pieces.
I remember
And
getting into ridiculous debates about where the boundary between performance marketing and brand marketing was. And I'm what does it matter?
it doesn't matter. I think if you get everyone rowing in the same direction, I think titles are important so that you can properly level and pay people and make sure that they're being, compensated for what they're working on. But I wish that titles weren't as important when it comes to like delineating the task that you're doing, because it just creates, there's so much friction between all the various types of marketing, and you're all having to point towards the same direction and have the same goals. Like, why isn't it just, structured in a different way? And I think I do see it moving that way again, which is great.
That's really good to hear. I wanted to kind of zoom in a little bit on the question of community, because I think, like you said, there are many sorts of marketing. I would say, even based on what you've discussed in this podcast, community is something that you've somewhat, you've got outsized returns from investing in community. And I feel like it is one of those things that often doesn't feel as sexy as something like PLG or, content or SEO or something.
I totally disagree. I think community is way more interesting than PLG.
I agree, but I'm not sure that's the general perception. But yeah, no, let's go on, because to me it feels like a really powerful lever. It does feel like one that's easy to get wrong, and again, maybe it's where I am and the investors I'm talking to. It's one that can often meet a bit of skepticism, or it's like, oh, it's easy to say you build a community, but how's that scalable, and how are you going to do it, and how are you going to get cut through? But yeah, it does seem like a really powerful lever. So how do you approach it, and how do you make sure that you're doing it the right way and actually get that sort of scale from building a community?
It's a hard thing to get right. And if it's inauthentic and coming from a place of just like, we want to grow revenue, then it's probably not going to work. And so what you saw like in the 2010s, a lot of companies were trying to figure out what's our community strategy, like way too late. And so then it just felt like they were building these fake communities of people that didn't actually exist. And so I think that left a taste in the mouths of some VCs and people because they've seen it done that way. My experience has always been you start with the community and like you take their feedback. It really matters what they think about your product, and you integrate their feedback into what you're shipping in the next 2 weeks, right? And then when you ship that, you say like, hey, you asked for this, here it is. You're doing really interesting events and that have like great content at them and people that they want to go to. And so I think it works when you're creating a space for community, but not just taking from it. You have to also kind of give back, which sounds so like woo-woo silly, but it's true. And so I think that we've seen a lot of products come along later stage that they're just trying to like build a community, which is actually just their customer base. And the sales team is like, oh my God, your community is 10,000 people. And they think all 10,000 people are sales leads. And that's just not what actually happens. And so I only know building, for me, building a developer product is like, you're going to be like successful because there's a large group of people that like using your product and they like talking about it and telling other people. And it just doesn't work otherwise. And so, yeah, I think that community is way sexier than PLG. How dare you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've offended you. But no, I think I agree. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm reflecting back to the brief period where we worked together, Ashley, back at Google Maps. And, we were on the API team, so it was developer tooling. And one of the things that I think stood out about how you approached it versus some of the other folks is that, there was a sort of sense of like, well, we're marketers and, we're building a community of those weird nerds who we don't really understand, but we've got money and we've got like designers. And so we're going to make these nice kind of events that are beautifully curated and they'll have nice food and drinks. And we'll invite these nerds in and kind of let them nerd out somehow. So what that meant is like the marketing team was sort of separating themselves from the community they were trying to create.
Yeah.
And that, I think you used the word authenticity. It felt inauthentic. They weren't putting themselves in the shoes of developers. They were just kind of spending money and like trying to like shout out messages at developers. And I think when you came in, you straight away put yourself in that position of like, what is it that developers want to get from Google Maps? And you said it sounds woo-woo, but actually to me, it's the opposite. It seems, in a sense, it's just an understanding of incentives, right? Like, why would they want to be part of our community? Right? What do they get out of it? Not what do we get out of it? Ask not what the community can do for you, but what you can do for your community. Straight away, that changed the dynamic, right? Which is like, oh, okay. Now we're thinking, what are services or what is the sort of gathering where developers are not just getting a nice free meal, but actually engaging with other developers, learning about Google Maps APIs in an authentic way so that they then leave excited to use our platform and also to continue to engage and be a part of the community of those who use the platform.
Absolutely. And we had so much fun with it. I think I was so excited to work on Google Maps because like I'm a huge map nerd, which but I'm also like an engineer and I'm not coming into the community as like this like weird person who's like, let me figure out how to monetize these people. I'm like, I enjoyed the work that I did there and all the work that I've done. And so, when I was like, hey, can I fly all these engineers over from Australia, take us on like a weird bus trip with a taxidermied raccoon that is vegan and do a bunch of like really great events with these incredible speakers. And so that the engineers could actually spend time, the Google engineers could spend time with their users and get feedback one-on-one. It was so interesting to me that everyone at Google was like, what? Because that's all I knew how to do, right? Like that's all I did my whole career. And so, yeah, I remember everyone being like, wait, you want our engineering team, our weirdos in Sydney, to fly over and do this bus trip with you? And I'm like, oh yeah, like I would love to talk to a maps engineer that has been like working on this product for a long time. Like that is the coolest thing ever. And it was, right? And so I think that's why we saw so much success with that event series. Also, it was just like really great branding.
That's right. And that was so much fun. And like it contrasted with an earlier event, I think just a few months earlier, where again, I got flown out to San Francisco for this. There was a beautiful space that was hired out. There were a bunch of speakers from the Google Maps enterprise team, nice food, nice drinks. And then what happened is it turned out it was on the same night as the World Series decider and the San Francisco team was playing. And everyone who was there and who weren't really developers in the first place was more interested in watching the baseball than actually hearing the talks. And so like we had to have the baseball on all night and everyone was just standing there watching it. Everybody was actually talking about Google Maps. And so I think, that's a really interesting contrast because it was a beautiful event, but it wasn't centered around developers who frankly should be caring more about the Maps APIs than the freaking baseball anyway.
Yeah. And if you go to any really well-run technical event, you can see it in people's eyes that they're excited to be listening to whatever is being talked about because it's usually some like really cool scaling story or like how we solve for X. Like it's just, I enjoy watching people watch people teach them how they did something and then seeing light bulbs go off. That's something that when you're building a community, like that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I just wanted to say that, you obviously specialize in building developer communities, but I think the lessons here are applicable much more broadly, right? So my
Yeah.
startup, Violet, we're working in the space of people who are caring for elderly parents. So as far away from developers as you can think, although some of those folks are, of course, developers. But when we talk about building a community for those people, the point is we don't want to be thinking, okay, here's our customer acquisition funnel. We want to be thinking, what do these people want from a community? And then make sure that we're actually facilitating a community that's about them and not about us. And that by doing so, we actually, by focusing on them and not on us, we actually benefit more than if we try to just sort of market to these people.
It applies broadly. My experience is all in developer, but in any sense of community, I think it applies.
And I think there is this element, I'll pose it as a question, right? Because like you said, you had a developer background, which made it easier for you to empathize with developers. I think, at Violet, my co-founder and members of our community are very much had this lived experience. But let's imagine you're working at a startup and the community you're trying to build, you don't naturally identify as a member of that community. Is that a deal breaker? Like, do you have to hire someone who naturally identifies, or is there a way to still facilitate that community in an authentic and sort of value adding way?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, right? Because we've all worked with people that are empathetic, kind people that can read a room. And those people can probably go into any community and figure out like, oh, I don't know everything here. Let me do some listening and then figure out like, what would they like to hear from us or what actually incentivizes them. So I don't think you have to like specifically be from the community you're selling to. Like I should never touch product. Like I'm an engineer, but don't ever let me touch anything that's going to go anywhere to a customer. The best thing I've ever built, I was like 12 years old building really bad websites. And then I used to build I still build tiny apps and stuff just for myself, but I'm not as technical as like someone on your engineering team is going to be. But I have been, dabbling in code since I was a child. And so like I do understand what is exciting about this market. But I don't think that you need that background. I've got incredible generalist marketers employed at portfolio companies, both in my fund and my angel portfolio, that came from very like consumer backgrounds, but they have the empathy and the curiosity to go figure out who they're selling to and who they're building community for and with. And it works.
All the best .coms are taken or crazily overpriced, so you settle on a workaround domain for your website. Don't compromise. Get a clean, sharp .tech domain that instantly says, this is a tech startup. Grab yours at get.tech/TSP for the Startup Podcast or via domain registrars like GoDaddy. You mentioned empathy, right? So I think it's definitely a leg up if you are actually a core member of that community and you blend in seamlessly. But the next best thing is to really understand your community. And like you said, yes, maybe you never worked as a developer and you don't have the same skill set that they do, but you speak their language, you understand how they think because you've kind of worked in that space, but also because you've studied them, right? You've studied them not in a kind of like outsider point of view, but like to really understand how they think so you can think like them. And I think that does apply in a lot of other spaces where you're like, okay, if you're going to market to people, and in fact, even that word too, right? It sounds very like something that, you're sort of shouting through a megaphone.
Yeah.
You kind of want to market with them, right? You want to engage with them. And so the first step is that element of anthropology nearly, right? Actually, where it's like, okay, let me understand these people. And how do you do that? Goes back to the beginning of what we were talking about, which is talk to your users, right? If you want to build a community of your users, you better understand who they are, what they care about, what they think about. And in the same way that you need to develop the product for them, you need to develop the community for them. And maybe in saying that, it's worth thinking of a community in a sense of the type of product in itself.
Never productize your community. However, I do agree with what you just said.
What do you mean by never productize your community then?
Yeah, it's what I mentioned earlier. Like I would have big brands come to me and say, we need to build community. And I was like, you sell cell phones. What? And so they were trying to build community just to drive revenue. And so in my mind, productization of a community is just when you're trying to turn the entire community into like a product that pays you money. And so I think that's where I've watched people get it wrong. But in my market, technical founders, technical products, it's like they're already empathetic to that end user. And I think one thing I'm always curious about is if like a founder is able to realize they're wrong about something or realize that one of their users or potential users actually has a better idea than what they were pitching. It's a really interesting point, but or nuance. And I think that it's an example of taking great feedback. I think when you're productizing a community, you're not taking any feedback. There's no bi-directional conversation. It's just like, we're yelling at you, like you mentioned, like the evangelism piece of it, and then you're going to pay us money, and there's no other direction of communication.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it's more about, whether you're being extractive or whether you are giving it back or paying it forward, right? And when I said treat the community as a product, is it in the same sense as when you're building a product, you want it to actually deliver value to people? You should be designing your community to deliver value to people. And it's really interesting. Somewhat coincidentally, we recently had, I guess, one of your peers in the dev VC space on the show, Joe Ruscio from HeavyBit. And
I love Joe.
Yeah, he's great. And one of the things we were talking about is that sort of in the tech infrastructure space that there is a real like abundance or pay it forward mindset, right? We were talking about it in the context of open source projects like GitLab, right? Where it's like you give something away first, and then later on, when you've put a lot of value out into the world, you start monetizing it. And it doesn't mean that you don't think about the long-term future. You're building a business. You need to make a lot of money. That's the whole venture model. But that you don't insist on, gatekeeping and trying to clip the ticket up front, that you first put that value out into the world. And I think that's what we're really talking about here with communities and with marketing more generally.
Yeah, totally. I think open source is an interesting way to start a business, building something on top of an open source project, or you're the maintainer of the project and you start a company. You do give a lot of value. And it's very hard to, the question you get from the VC is, how are you going to monetize the open source community? Which is like a terrifying question to get. It just takes longer. I think that's the one piece for all the open source companies I've backed, which are a lot, is I know in my head that they're going to have to raise a little bit more money because they're going to have more time between being able to raise this big seed round and the big A rounds, because it's just going to take a bit more time to get monetized usage.
That's right. So paying it forward, by definition, if you think of it from a cash flow cycle point of view, delivering value now and collecting money from it in 2 years, that's going to put a strain on your balance sheet. It means you're going to need to raise more venture capital, which is one of the downsides. But I guess one thing, and again, we touched on this with Joe, but I'd love your thoughts. And also generalizing this is not just about tech infrastructure. I think tech infrastructure is a great vertical to talk about because it has a certain purity to it, but it applies in all sorts of different startups, right? And all sorts of different domains. But this question of, okay, we're going to give away value now and monetize it later. And you said it's a terrifying question when VCs ask, so how are you going to monetize this? And, I think there's a balance, right, between not focusing too much on that monetization early on and not thinking about any levers that you may have in the future to actually extract some of the value that you've given or extract revenue from some of the value you've put out into the world. So how do you, as an investor and as a student of startups, like how do you view that balance at the early stage between creating your community, between putting value out into the world, having a great product that is maybe free or cheap, and then later on making sure that you're going to get the sort of returns that you as an investor need in order for your own fund economics?
Something I like to do and work with founders on, and as I say, what does your pricing page look like in 5 years? And I don't mean just like, how much is it going to cost, but like, show me a feature chart, like what's in the free tier, what's in the team tier or the company tier, what's in the enterprise tier. And, at the bottom of most pricing pages, you see like what each tier offers, right? Like the different features. Build all of that out. Build every single piece of it out, and then put dates in each place saying like, we're going to ship all these things of the free products in the next year. And then we're going to start shipping a few features that need to be in the team product. And when I say team product, like in my mind, if a team is over 5 people at a company or 10 people at a company, or the usage is over, X amount, they can probably be paying you, right? And they probably want to pay you because there's this weird thing that happens where you're getting too much value from a product and you have a big company that you're working at. And if you're not paying for the thing, you get nervous.
If you recall, that is literally how the Google Maps enterprise business started. Google Google Maps API was a completely free product, and it was really the first cloud API that kind of took off for those who have long memories, right? It was the API for hackers,
It was so cool.
and it was completely free. And then people started knocking on the door and saying, you need to give us a way to pay you for this thing because my board won't sign off on it unless I have a paid enterprise contract. And off the back of that, by the time that I left, which was already nearly 10 years ago, that was a $500 million a year business. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, right? Where you eventually
Yeah.
people actually need to pay you for something for their own peace of mind, for their own governance, because you've become business critical.
Totally. And so I think that if you think about it in that way and you build that pricing page out with the features and you think about it very forward looking and build backwards, you're not going to put so much in the free product that you can't build things like the issue if you put everything in the free product, pulling it out of the free product and charging for it is really hard. We've seen that before and it's a nightmare. So you just think ahead. And the things that you should be charging for are the things that teams or people at larger companies will need, depending on your product. That might be like single sign-on. It might be some sort of security thing, which I think everything should have equal great security, but that's a whole different conversation. I don't think it should be a paid feature. I think security should be like table stakes. But I think that if you think about it that way, it becomes very easy to build a robust free offering that still allows you the ramp to a very large revenue business. I think that the ramp is just a little bit longer on an open source project because you have to build open source project traction alongside a business. And those two things are hard to do. Just one of them, doing both at the same time is just extra work.
And, just to, I guess, to illustrate the fact that this doesn't only apply to developer tools, some of the thinking that we're doing at Violet is, for example, we're building effectively a B2C product that the business model is to sell it through enterprise B2B2C. But we would also like to go direct to consumer with a free offering. So it could be freemium. It could be that we just stop delivering some of the most valuable features and make people pay to unlock them. But what we're actually looking at that I think is more interesting is to have the entire product be free. And then the question is, well, why would the enterprises pay for it? And that's because we can give them things like analytics dashboards and other things that are really valuable to them as an enterprise. And that they have to pay for and they are willing to pay for. At the same time, you can give effectively the exact same functionality away for free to the general community. And so, yeah, if you find these leverage points, they can exist in all sorts of different products. It's not just about developer tooling at all.
Absolutely. It applies all the way across. And I think, I'm a big believer in any type of software. There's got to be some way to test it and use it on like a smaller scale. And that should probably be free. And yeah, I think it's the case. When I see companies that don't have a free option, I'm like, why not? I know everyone that I've talked to that does not have a free option on their startup is like, because we have to make money. Everyone knows you have to have revenue now. And I'm like, yes, but if you don't have a free option, no one's going to try this out. So I think it applies across all industries that are building software.
So Ashley, I think this gives us a really good overview of how to think about early marketing and growth and not getting yourself trapped in a single channel or a single acronym. But if you, from all of your vast experience, if you're able to share, what are some of the most concrete tactical tips that you see really working for early stage founders, no matter what their startup does?
Yeah, I think, again, my background is primarily dev tools, right? However, I think it applies across. And so I think the things that are working right now, somehow social media has pivoted towards LinkedIn and Reddit. I've been a Reddit user for almost 20 years. So for me, I'm like, great, this is easy. But I'm like, this does not work. We're seeing a lot of leads and users and traffic hit new websites, new products from LinkedIn and Reddit, which if you told me to say that 5 years ago, I would laugh at you, but that's where it's happening. We're still seeing stuff come from Twitter and nothing from Facebook or Instagram, really. Reels and TikTok are huge, as you know. And I think that if you don't have a good strategy for social media, then figure it out. Events, either online events or in-person events, like people, if they're really passionate about the thing that you've created, you can do some really interesting things with events and get a lot of people in a room or on a virtual room to, give you feedback, talk about what you're building, get pilot users. Again, this is like thinking you're in the first year and a half of your business. Content, founder content. So everything you write can't be like I built blah, blah does blah. Like no one cares, right? And so what's more interesting in most cases is when I was building this thing, here's the 10 lessons we learned that made it very hard to build. So we did it this way. So for me, it's like a founder writing technical content about how they solve some problem, some technical problem is
Yeah.
the best way to get any eyes on things.
Can I sort of pause you on that one? Because I think it's an
Yeah.
interesting point, and I wanted to kind of contextualize it with you maybe in the current world of AI slop, where generating content is easier than ever. But actually, even before AI, there are a lot of content mills out there, right? Where a big company would be like, our SEO strategy is we've got like 50 people in the Philippines bashing out content, and now they've got like the equivalent of 5,000 people with AI doing the same thing. And what you are saying, and I agree with, is that unique, insightful, bespoke content that, again, we were talking about community, that speaks directly to your users with genuine insight, authenticity, and originality will stand out even more in this world of slop. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Authentic content right now is doing so well. I can tell, I mean, we can all kind of tell what's fully AI generated and what's written in the voice of the person. And I think everyone's using AI to like help edit,
Yeah, that's different.
but you can tell when something is like truly from the mind of the person versus like, oh, I just told AI to write a thing. And that's fine. Like we're going to have that content. But I think it's created an interesting thing where when a founder actually writes an authentic piece, and in my case, like I'm a founder of a fund, right? It's different, but you can tell when I write something because everything has like grammar errors all throughout it, and I just leave it that way. But it's pretty clear when someone's like writing about a lived experience, and love AI. I like lived experience and authenticity is hard to replicate. It's going to get easier, I'm sure. Maybe. I do think there's something special about really authentic content.
There's a word that I use around lived experience, like content, or just talking to someone who has lived experience, even when I'm interviewing
Yeah.
someone for a job. And I'm like, what's the difference between someone who is good at talking about being an engineering leader versus someone who's really got the lived experience? And I often use the word texture. There's some sort of the little things that they say that make you realize that they haven't just read it from a book, that they've experienced this stuff. I call it the texture of the content, right? And AI content has no texture. It's smooth. And when it's written by a person who has a point of view, who is authentic, you can really feel that texture, and it's grippy, right? You're like, you want to know more.
Yeah, and I find that for me, I can tell if it's, within reason. I can tell if something's been written by the founder if I start reading it in their voice. Because my writing is very much like, it's all like fragmented sentences and there's weird commas and like nothing makes sense, but it has my accent somehow. And I find that my stuff, like seriously, if you read my stuff, you're like, that's written in a Southern accent. I don't know how to explain that. But I find that when founders write really strong content, I start reading it in their voices. And yeah, that's kind of the dream. AI is fine. Like the content stuff is, I think, I think we've almost peaked because people are making fun of it so bad. And I think that we're going to see less AI generated content and more authentic stuff because the AI stuff is just not performing as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a sort of interesting thing, right? Where like there was always some element of scarcity around content. And when that element of scarcity is removed, it's a race to the bottom, right? You just flood the zone with slop, and then everyone learns not to read any of it. So in a way, it cancels itself out. And what you're left with, the only stuff that people want to read or consume is content that's generated by humans.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I go to a news site or I go to something, I will try to find things to read that are authentic and not just like something I can tell that's been created by a bot.
Yeah, what other, we were talking about that authentic content. What other tactical tips do you have for founders at that early stage to get that early growth?
Something that I think a lot of founders struggle with and I struggle with is get very succinct about what you're building. Talk about the value very quickly because most people listen for like 15 seconds or something. And so if you're in a conversation and you want to like that conversation to continue and they're actually like listening, make the point fast. Be able to talk about your company in a way that actually makes sense. So many brilliant founders, they'll pitch me and they'll get 12 minutes into describing what they're building and my brain turned off like at 11 minutes in or like 1 minute in and I've been just like over here. So I think getting very, very tight on taglines and what value your product delivers, both when talking to investors and on your website and talking to customers. Super important. Huge miss sometimes. Make a lot of noise. I think that's one thing I'm bad at. I'm an introvert naturally, happily. Like if I could hide in my apartment for the rest of my life, I'd be happy. And so you can't do that. You have to talk about what you're building to everyone around you online, which kind of pairs with the content and social media piece. To everyone in your network, go find people you used to work with that like might be a great person to talk about your product with. If you're raising VC funding, bug your investors for intros or potential investors for intros. Go look at their portfolios and say like, hey, we see that you have 100 companies in your portfolio. These 10 would be great people for us to talk to about whatever we're building. Like, don't be afraid to go do that. And so it really is, you have to be your biggest fan. And that's pretty hard for some people. I find it very challenging and I'm getting better at it. And I think that when you start to do that, finding those like test users or those first few customers or those first people even to give you feedback on your idea is very hard for some people. So, but you have to do it and just get over the fear of rejection because everyone is going to be rejected. Someone's going to tell you your product's dumb or your idea is stupid or you're not going to get the funding. Like that happens to all of us.
Yes.
And it's part of the game.
It resonates a lot. I think one of the things that people ask is, okay, this is great. Like put out authentic content. How do I put out authentic content? And I think there are two pieces to it. One is to be interesting. And hopefully if you are doing something in a space that you're passionate about, you are interesting, right? You have something worth saying. And then the second half is to find yourself interesting, right? To believe, not only to be interesting, but to believe that what you are saying is interesting because then it makes it that much easier. And it's funny, I've gone through this journey where I used to hate listening to myself on my own podcast or on someone else's podcast. And now I quite like it. And I don't know if I've just become like an egomaniac, but I'm like, I listen to myself. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm like, I don't mind listening to that. I'm not embarrassed anymore. So, I mean, there's an element of practice, but there's also just an element of realizing that, like with imposter syndrome, everybody feels it. But if you're doing something interesting, you have something interesting to say it. And that's all that authentic means, right? It doesn't mean you do it your own way, but you're actually talking from your own experience about things that interest you. And that's totally different from, again, that sense of like, I'm trying to project an image to attract a certain customer profile, that sort of top-down Machiavellian way of doing it. It's like, you know what? I'm just putting myself out into the world. And if I'm interesting, that will be attractive to people.
And if you're authentic and interesting, someone will find you interesting. Someone's also going to find you boring. And so I think it's really important to get used to taking criticism and to getting used, like rejection is every day in building a startup. It's every day. And you have to get very comfortable with rejection and criticism. And so for me, super challenging, right? Like
challenging.
It's so hard to be told no by someone that you spent like an hour talking about yourself to, right? Like it's just so hard, but it's part of the journey. You have to get good at it. It's just something you have to get really strong at. Customers are going to tell you no, founders, investors, like it just is part of it. And so I don't think most people walk through their lives every day getting used to like that much rejection or that much feedback.
I would say this pre-seed raise I'm doing right now, which isn't actually going badly, and yet I have endured more rejection in the last 3 weeks than in any 3-week period in my life.
Devastating. It's devastating. And so I think you have to just know that it's going to be really hard and it's going to not be fun and it's going to feel weird because we're not used as humans to being told like no all of the time. And you get like very little positive reinforcement. But like when you get those first few users and you get those like that one person who sends you an email that's like, oh my God, I love this thing that you built. Here's the reasons why it helped me do X, Y, Z. It kind of makes it all feel good. And so you just have to think about that. And I think one very important part is getting used to rejection because what can happen is you shut down and you don't build or you don't talk about what you're building or you don't try and get that one more customer or take that one more like funding meeting. And then you're just like destroying your company. So it's not talked about enough.
It's really about taming your own reptile brain, isn't it? Or not even your reptile brain. It's your primate brain, that sort of social brain that says rejection is a threat. Whereas if you actually realize on an intellectual level that it's kind of like you miss every shot you don't take and that the cost of rejection is very low. And so it's a numbers game. And, if you take 1,000 shots and you have a 95% rejection rate, that's 50 hits. If you take 100 shots and you have an 80% rejection rate, that's only 20 hits. So, you have to put yourself in the path of massive rejection to succeed, but you have to keep telling yourself that because, that more primitive part of your brain does not believe it. And I'm experiencing that every day.
It's so hard. Something that we do, so I have a bunch of pre-seed companies raising a seed right now, and even more seed companies raising an A. And the target is like 50 meetings. 50. That is 49 no's on a good day, right? It might be 50 no's. And so I think that's just something you have to get really comfortable with.
Okay, Ashley, I think that's a really great note to end on. And, what I'm feeling personally, and what really core to that getting to 0 to 1 is the path between 0 to 1 and 1,000 is paved with rejection, right? And rejection from investors, rejection from channels in a sense, right? You try something, it just doesn't work. And you just got to dust yourself off and do it again. And, before we started recording, you were talking about grit, right? And it's like, that sense of like being able to pick yourself up day after day and making it work. That's not just the sort of like motivational speech. It's actually core to your way of operating, right? As a startup, if you're talking about experimentation, most experiments result in failure. And so you can't take that personally. You've got to start again every day and run your next experiment. So I think that's just a really valuable piece of wisdom to walk away from. Now, Ashley, if people want to follow more of your content online on social media or your blog, where's the best place for them to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's just search Ashley Smith Vermilion. But my website is Vermilion, 1L, like the National Monument, .fund. So Vermilion.fund, links out to everything. Don't follow me on Twitter. I never post, but I do LinkedIn sometimes. And my website has like all the channels to get in contact with me and all my writings.
And I assume also if you're a founder of a relatively early stage developer-focused startup, then you'd love to hear from them, right?
Or if you're still working at a company and you're like, I feel like I should start a company, it's never too early. Like I will talk to you a year before you launch something or think about launching something. So most people I back have not actually left their company yet.
That's fascinating because one of the topics does sometimes come up is like, do you have to quit your job before VCs will take you seriously? And the answer is often yes, but it's great to know that there are folks like you out there who are actually there to support people through that very beginning stage of their founder journey.
Absolutely. It's honestly, I enjoy I'm working with a founder now. We're like working through the memo to potentially even decide if we're going to do venture funding. And it's really fun for me to be there that early and kind of be able to help at that stage. So if you're just considering starting a technical company and, just reach out. I get pretty excited about anything technical.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Ashley. I think that's the pod. Really appreciate it. I learned a huge amount. I'm sure our listeners will too.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you.
Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by .tech domains. Naming your startup should be easy, but it isn't because all the good .com names are taken or wildly overpriced. No more. You don't have to compromise. Your domain shows your focus and intent, so make it sharp, clean, and unmistakably tech with a .tech domain. How do you do that? Head to www.get.tech/TSP or a registrar like GoDaddy and grab your .tech domain today. Get.tech/TSP for the Startup Podcast so they know you came from us.